Welcome back, everyone. Sorry to be so late with this video, but ran into some difficulties and, well, forget all that. I'm here and my eye's all better, more or less. If you take a look, it's a little bit red still, I think. But I don't know if any of you looked at the link in the previous video where I showed I had a link to a YouTube video that showed the procedure. They put two needles, probes in my eye. One was a lighted probe and the other one was the forceps that went after that epiretinal membrane. So anyways, it was pretty red for a few days, although it never hurt. Even afterwards, it didn't ache like, like someone punched me in the eye or anything. Although the eye isn't 100%, better. It's because that membrane, it kind of pulled away at the what do you call it, the retina, and created an irregular surface. And right now, there's still a little bump in the center of my retina that's causing a little bit of distortion in my left eye vision. But hopefully over time that should get better. So next, good news, we got our D7 visas for Portugal. That's our the long-term stay, the long stay visa for residency. And we are leaving in just a few days. Today is Thursday the 8th, and we are leaving Tuesday the 13th. We'll make a layover in London. We go from Dallas to London. We'll lay over for one day. We arrive there on the 14th in London, and then we'll stay a day and take an early morning flight to Lisbon, Portugal on the 15th. From there, we'll take a train to Tavira. So we're excited about that. Looking forward to it. Although I should have one more video to go before I get there. I've got it all scripted and all the images prepared. So as soon as I finish videoing this episode, I'll just go right into the next one and hopefully get that one up in the next 2 or 3 days. So today, I had gotten a comment in one of my videos asking me to do a video about the offices in the Ottoman Empire. I don't remember now if he specifically mentioned the German offices, but I believe he did. But I figured as long as I'm talking about post offices in the Ottoman, I'll cover them all. But first, let me do this. I do have to rely on my notes on the computer in front of me. And so in this video, I will have 4 questions and answers for you. The first question being, what are offices in the Ottoman Empire / Turkish Empire / Turkey / Levant, and why were they there? The answer is, the offices refer to the post offices. Of course, they had other offices, embassy offices, consular, military offices, whatever, but specifically these are the post offices in the Turkish Empire. They were originally set up to handle government mail, consular mail, embassy mail, and whatnot. But soon they were opened up to regular citizens' regular mail. And the reason they set up these post offices was, ostensibly it was because the Turkish postal system, which had only just started in 1840, and these offices started, working soon after that, 1857 in the case of Great Britain. Although all the countries had postal services going, pre-stamp, before stamps were even being produced. But like I said, the Turkish postal system was, new, and it was very slow to expand and to improve its service. So these the countries who set up post offices, they wanted a more reliable service which they themselves could provide. Now, of course, that is a convenient excuse for them. A side benefit to that was that all these countries that opened up offices in the Ottoman, they were all colonial powers: France, Russia, Great Britain. By this time, in the mid 1800s and later, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe, and that term was coined by the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas I. In other words, the Ottoman Empire was failing rapidly. And the colonial powers were all just champing at the bit, circling like vultures, wanting to grab their piece of the crumbling empire. And nothing denotes power and authority quite like issuing your own stamps in someone else's country, Now, for further background, it's important to note that just going back hundreds of years, back to like the 1100s, the Ottoman Empire had been eager to conduct trade with Europe and to make things as easy as possible for these Christian nations, since Turkey was Muslim rule. They drew up these agreements with Christian nations called capitulations. And what these capitulations did was give them the freedom to be themselves, basically, the freedom to worship their Christian faith. It gave them tax exemption, and it also made them exempt from Ottoman laws and court jurisdiction. Anything that a European trader may have done to get crosswise with the law would have to be handled by that trader's own country. So like I said, that's going way back to the 1100s, and then it just throughout the centuries, just more and more capitulations were signed to more and more countries. Now, while these capitulations did not directly lead to the establishment of the post offices, it did lay the groundwork and allowed for these countries to just more or less push the envelope further and get agreements to open their post offices and to get their post offices granted extraterritorial rights. And the Turks were more than happy to oblige, considering the shambles they were in. They needed all the friends they could get. Which brings us now to question number 2. How can there be offices in Turkey in the 1800s when that country did not even exist until 1923? And that's a good question. And as you can see on this next slide, within the Ottoman Empire, authorities referred to the empire as the Sublime State or the Ottoman State. As for the people themselves, they didn't call themselves Ottomans or even Turks, except for the people who were of the Turkish tribes in Anatolia. Otherwise, wherever you were, whatever region you were in, the locals referred to themselves as that regional identity. Turkey and Turkish Empire was used by European nations, or the European people, going back, again, hundreds and hundreds of years. Just more or less in the same way that the Soviet Union was referred to as Russia by everyone. And then you will also hear the term Levant. The Levant was the part of the Ottoman Empire that consists of present-day Israel, Jordan, Syria, parts of Egypt, and certain other parts of Asia Minor. Where Ottoman comes from is the fact that the leader of the Turkish tribes, his name was Osman, or in Arabic, Uthman. And he was the one who founded the Ottoman or Ottoman Empire. Okay, so enough of the background here. We'll get to question 3. What about the stamps? That's what we tuned in for, right? So basically, we're talking about 7 countries here who established post offices in the Turkish Empire. And I'll take them in roughly chronological order according to when stamps were first used. Now, all of these, like I said, had postal services had begun, way back even before this. But taking, for example, our first one, Great Britain. They started using stamps of Great Britain in the Turkish Empire in 1857, but these were the regular definitives, starting with the Queen Victoria definitives, with no special markings or anything to denote that they were for the Turkish Empire. They were just used there. And the only way to tell if you have one of these, what's called a forerunner, that means the stamps that were used before official Turkish stamps were issued. The only way to tell these forerunners is by a cancel that shows a clear printing of the city where it originated. So there's no such thing as a mint forerunner. A mint Turkish forerunner is just a mint stamp of Great Britain. So Great Britain began their mail service in the Ottoman in 1832. In 1854, a British Army post office was opened, and in 1856, the mail service was extended to regular civilians also. And for this purpose, they used special cancels to denote which city they originated from. So from Constantinople, they used a cancellation with a C in a barred oval, as you can see here. Then, as post offices were opened in other cities, alphanumeric cancels were used to identify them. So, for example, as you see in this slide, the F87 refers to the city of Smyrna, for which an office was opened in 1872. In 1873, they opened a post office in Beirut and used the G06 cancel. There was also an S cancel for the city of Istanbul, B01 for Alexandria, B02 for Suez. And then later on they used regular circular date stamps, which also included the city names and the dates. Now, in 1884, the Turkish piastra was devalued against British sterling, and this caused a bit of a problem for the British post office, because British citizens could buy British stamps at the Turkish post offices for less than the face value, because they were being sold, at the Turkish rate, at the converted rate. And then they could go back to England and resell them at face value and make a profit. So to combat this, the British office, beginning in 1885, started overprinting regular British definitives with Turkish currency, paras and piastre. They also overprinted stamps with Levant, as shown here, for stamps intended for parcels, newspapers, and printed matter. Now Russia in 1863 became the first country to issue stamps specifically for use in the Ottoman Empire. And the first one was a fairly large stamp, 30 millimeters on a side, a square stamp with a quite striking design. Looks rather nice, don't you think? Here it is compared to a typical Great Britain definitive. Now, the problem with trying to collect Russia offices in the Turkish Empire, they require diligence and careful study by collectors because, as the Scott Catalog warns, all the issues through 1879, which consists of Scott numbers 1 through 26, they caution that they should only be purchased with certificates of authenticity, as they have all been extensively forged. Austria, they established a postal system in the Ottoman way back in 1748. Their first use of stamps in the empire was in 1863, and at that time they began using the stamps of Lombardy and Venetia, Scott numbers 15 through 24 in the empire. And again, as they had no markings to identify their use for the offices in Turkey, these forerunners have to be collected used with clear city postmarks. By 1867, though, Lombardy and Venetia had separated from Austria. Lombardy had merged with Sardinia, and Venetia had acceded to the Kingdom of Italy. So now they had stamps specifically for offices in Turkey. And what were these? Well, these were evidently leftover issues for Lombardy and Venetia. And although they have no explicit markings identify them as for use in Turkey, you can identify them as such because these particular stamps were never issued during the time Lombardy Venetia belonged to Austria. So you can collect these in mint condition. In 1886, Austria began overprinting their stamps in Turkish currency and using those. And in the last years of their offices in Turkey, they actually printed the stamps inscribed in piastra and paras. Again, postally used copies are quite a bit more valuable than mint copies, and faked cancels are abundant, so buyer beware. Now Germany was unified in 1870, and they wasted no time in looking for lands to colonize and for areas to influence and to exert their power. They opened an office in Constantinople, and again we find forerunners. From 1870 to 1871, Germany used leftover stamps from the North German Confederation for use in their offices in Turkey. And from 1872 until 1883, they used German Reich stamps, the Deutsches Reich stamps. Again, these are forerunners. Finally, in 1884, they started using specifically overprinted stamps for their offices in Turkey. And this slide shows the first issue of German offices in the Turkish Empire. Next, we come to France in 1885. Although France had established postal services in the Ottoman Empire back in 1812, that was before there were postage stamps. So France didn't really start producing stamps explicitly for Turkey until 1885. And as with Great Britain, it was for the same reason. The Turkish currency had been devalued against the franc, and so there was an arbitrage going on where people bought low and went back to France and sold high. However, there are, again, forerunners for France. However, I've been unable to find any information on when they started using forerunners and which particular stamp issues were involved. I did find an image of a cover from 1864 that was mailed from Jaffa, so we know that forerunners go back at least that far, to 1864, probably earlier too. But if anyone can point me towards some solid information about this, leave me some info in the comments below. I'd appreciate it. So in 1885, France started issuing stamps overprinted in Turkish currency. Here's the first issue, Scott number 1, produced in 1885. Later, some issues were printed with the inscription Levant, and some cities also produced stamps themselves with their own city names inscribed, such as Kavala and Didiach or Didiach. Next, we come to Romania, who came along in 1896. Romania's stamps for the offices in Turkey are the easiest for which to complete a collection, as there were only 12 issued and they are all fairly inexpensive. Only 2 have catalog values of $50 and $80, and half of the stamps, 6 of them, are only valued between 50 cents and $3. So go for it. The last country we're looking at here is Italy, who established offices in the Ottoman in 1873. In 1874, the general stamps of Italy of 1863 were overprinted with the word estero, meaning abroad. And these stamps were intended to meet the demand of all the Italian post offices abroad, including those in the Ottoman Empire. In 1908, Italy began overprinting Italian stamps specifically for use in the Ottoman. Many of these had only the Turkish denominations overprinted on them. Others were also overprinted with the city names where they were intended for use, such as Durazzo, as well as Smyrna, Jerusalem, and several other cities. So now we come to our fourth and final question. When did this end? What happened to all these post offices? Well, the answer is two things happened. First was World War I. And although Germany was allied with Turkey, the Germans closed all their post offices in 1914 when war commenced. And it doesn't help that although they were allied with Germany, not everyone in the government was for that allegiance, for that alliance. And in fact, there was a lot of anti-German sentiment throughout the empire because of the Germans' aggressive nature, their push for power and influence. And what happened is the Austrian post office decided, German, Austrian, what do these people know? If there, any violence against the Germans could easily spill over to the Austrians, so the Austrians said, let's get out of here. And they also closed all of their offices in 1914. Now, the Allied powers, which were Britain, France, and Russia, on whom the Ottoman Empire, Austria, and Germany had all declared war, they were forced by the Ottoman authorities to close all their post offices. And here is a picture of a French postbox being forcibly removed from a wall. Romania and Italy, although initially neutral in the war, they eventually entered on the side of the Allied powers, and naturally their post offices closed too. Now come the end of the war, things are getting mended and patched over, and some of these offices were allowed to reopen. France reopened, and Great Britain, but at a much lower level, in only a few cities. But then a second thing happened. In July of 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne was signed, officially marking the end of the Ottoman Empire and the formation of the modern Turkish state. This treaty stipulated that all agreements and capitulations were now null and void, which included all the postal agreements, and by the end of October 1923, all foreign post offices were closed. So that takes care of the foreign post offices in the Turkish Empire. I hope I've answered a few of the questions for you and that you have a better understanding. And I want to thank you once again for joining me here today. My next video, which I hope to have up in the next few days, will concern a top secret U.S. Post Office Department project, which went off pretty well actually. So stay tuned for that. Until then, this is Ted the Talking Stamp Collector wishing you all happy stamping.